Should I film today's video like this so that my cat is in frame? Hello, I'm Danny. Welcome to my channel. I'm going to speak a little bit about the 5 books I read in January. My reading goal for the year, in terms of a numerical reading goal, is to read 60 books this year, and so reading 5 books in 1 month is sticking exactly on top of that goal, which I'm pleased about, especially because one of the books I read this month was a real chunkster of a fantasy book, and so I'm feeling pretty good about my reading pace so far. I'm going to cover the books I read roughly in order from least liked to most liked. And unfortunately, first up was the kind of disappointing book of An Academy for Liars by Alexis Henderson. This is a book that I felt like was getting a lot of buzz, so I wanted to pick it up. It's a fantasy dark academia. In this book, the main character is a college dropout who finds out that her fiance is cheating on her, and shortly afterwards gets a mysterious phone call inviting her to take an entrance exam for this mysterious college, which turns out to be a magical college where they train students in the art of persuasion. And persuasion is where you influence people and the world around you to do what you want to a magical extent. This book's strength was definitely in the horror elements. I think when it got strange and weird and creepy, it was really good. Where I thought it was more disappointing was just in the overall world building and the character development. Everything felt really frantic and underexplored. It seems like this book might have benefited from being a series instead of trying to fit everything it was trying to fit in one standalone novel. Next up is We Solve Murders by Richard Osman. I really enjoyed this one. It hit all the sentimental notes it was meant to hit for me. Mystery thriller is not one of my wheelhouse genres, but I like a good, funny, genre-savvy, lighthearted novel of any flavor, so I knew I wanted to pick this one up, and I'm glad I did. We Solve Murders follows Amy, who is a bodyguard at a private security company, and her father-in-law, Steve, who is a widower and retired detective who's living a comfortable retirement in England. Then at the beginning of the novel, Amy finds out that she is being framed for the murders of some of the clients of her security company, and that she herself, her life is in danger as well. And so Steve comes out of his comfortable life to help her figure out what is going on. This book has a delightful, eccentric cast of characters who are full of quirks and witty one-liners as they're in dangerous situations. And really the core of it is Amy and Steve's relationship as in-laws and exploring their unusual friendship. And I thought it was a really lovely, cozy read. Up next is Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adebrenye. This is a book set in the near future, or in a sort of alternate parallel universe where convicts can opt to compete in these death matches for a slim chance at freedom. This fits squarely in conversation with something like Squid Game that takes everyday injustices that we've become kind of insensitive to and takes them to their cartoonish ends. And I would say that in each of those stories, the point is really to emphasize that this is not so speculative. The story is an overlay for the true present-day horror of our societies. And Adebrenye really drives this point home with footnotes that are included throughout the novel that call out cold facts about policing and the carceral system. I would say it's not subtle in its messaging, but it was a really effective critique of the carceral system and reality TV. The Lies of Locke Lamora was my first 5-star read of the month. The Lies of Locke Lamora takes place in this gritty Venetian fantasy world, and at its heart is a gang of con artists. Locke Lamora is the leader of this gang, and he is a audacious, clever, witty, smooth-talking type. And while he's scheming and executing this grand con, he gets caught in the crosshairs of this power struggle in the criminal underbelly of the city where they're operating. One thing that I would say stood out for me is the Locke Lamora type of character can often fall into this Mary Sueism where they're so talented and always lucky. And in this novel, there was a lot of emphasis on Locke Lamora's weaknesses, as well as the strengths and weaknesses of the other members of his gang. And overall, there was a strong theme of resilience and playing to your strengths while mitigating and shoring up your weaknesses. And I found that theme really resonant personally. I'm really interested to read more of this series, but I don't know how much of a hurry I should be in to do so. The first book is pretty self-contained. It stands on its own really well, but it seems like the author may be somewhat stalled in finishing out the series. The last book that was published was book 3 over 10 years ago. So if you're familiar with this series, please let me know whether I should proceed. Finally, my second 5-star book of the month was James by Percival Everett. This one is quite acclaimed, so I feel like I'm just catching up to it. But this is a reimagining of Huckleberry Finn told from the perspective of Huck's enslaved friend, Jim. It's not a straight up retelling. In layman's terms, I would say this is a canon divergence fan fiction. But I read Huckleberry Finn in preparation to read this book last year because I had never read it before, and I'm glad I did. I think that they're both really important works in their own way, and I was glad to have the added context to read James. And something I've realized as I've restarted this hobby and reflected on what my reading tastes are now, what I'm seeing is that I am a huge sucker for intertextuality, whether that is a retelling or a satire or including allusions or stories within stories. I love thinking about what a story told in a certain way, told by a certain person in a certain place and time has to offer compared to the same story told differently. The core thesis of the book is in recognizing Jim's interiority in a way that Mark Twain was not prepared to do, was not equipped to do in his version. And expanding broader than that, a strong theme of literacy in this book, in Jim's ability to read and write, that I think also speaks to the lives and perspectives and moments that we have no record of. And in that sense, it was a really meaningful book. So that concludes my reading wrap up for January. I find it interesting that I try to read pretty eclectically. I'm not trying to read towards a particular theme at the moment, and I try not to read the same type of book back to back. But one motif that did seem to come up a lot this month was the found family motif. And in particular, if I think about it, We Solve Murders, James, and The Lies of Locke Lamora all speak to or depict a non-traditional paternal relationship, and I find that pretty interesting. Going into February, I am already making progress in Everyone Who Is Gone Is Here by Jonathan Blitzer. That's going to be my first nonfiction of the year, and The Black Tongue Thief by Christopher Buehlman. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of the books I mentioned in this video, how your reading year is going, And until next time.